This Choircast podcast episode is brought to you by Returning to Eden, a field guide for the spiritual journey. Returning to Eden is a book by Heather Hamilton for people who resonate with aspects of Christianity but struggle with the coherence of its claims. You can purchase Returning to Eden by Heather Hamilton at Amazon.com or at returningtoeden.com.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? So you have joined us for another book club episode, and today we are going right down the line after the Noah story to the Tower of Babel. But we got to make a quick stop before we get there. The Tower of Babel actually happens in chapter 11, but in chapter 10, we get a really important piece of information about the Tower of Babel, about who it is that's creating this tower. And that comes in this chapter 10, the Table of Nations. And the Table of Nations really represents a sort of genealogical map of the world as it was known at that time. And the biggest message that we should get from that Table of Nations is really that we are all interconnected, right? That we are all brothers and sisters. We are all siblings in the world. We are all connected. We all come from each other. And we get this start here of a movement from a mythical view of humanity to a political one, right? And that's an important piece, because this earlier part of the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings, you see God creating humanity and the earth and all of that. And then now we get into this political space, and it's this transition where politics are created by humanity, not by God. And even later, we have Israel, that comes later. But right now, we're moving right headlong into politics. And in that Table of Nations, in chapter 10, verses 8 and 9, we get this little piece, this little bit of important information. It says, Cush became the father of Nimrod, which, can we just stop for a second? Best name, if you... if you're looking for a name for your kid, Nimrod... I'm sorry. Okay, I have ADD, and I apologize. Actually, I don't apologize. That's just who I am. But Cush became the father of Nimrod. He was the first on earth to become a mighty warrior. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. That's verse 9. And then it says in verse 10, the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad. So we get this idea that we have a mighty warrior here named Nimrod, unfortunately named Mighty Warrior. And what we see in Babel is the beginning. What we are seeing here is empire building, right? We are seeing the expansion of an empire through warfare, through violence, through all of that. And so in some ways, the Tower of Babel is actually about empire building. Another thing pointed out in a really great book, What is the Bible, I think is the title of the book, by Rob Bell. He points out that this is also the first appearance of bricks, and that is really important. This is the first appearance of, so prior to this, we can imagine everything built by stone. And, you put a stone on top of a stone, and maybe you've got mud that kind of connects the stone. Maybe not. Maybe it's just dry stone on dry stone. And you can't build things that are that big or that stable. You can't do that nearly as well with stone. But now we've got bricks. And bricks, these uniform things, this just revolution in technology. And so this king, this mighty warrior, this empire is being built out of warfare and violence, and also out of technological innovation. And technological innovation is really what I want to lean into here, because, man, this story, it's so good. All right. Also, you might think I'm going to tell you that the Tower of Babel didn't exist. And you're right in part. It didn't exist in the time period that this story is sort of placing it. However, scholars think that this portion of the Bible was being written during the Babylonian captivity. And during that time, there was a ziggurat, an actual tower named Etemenaki. I think that's right. Etemenaki. Yes. Etemenaki. And it was apparently an incomplete ziggurat, an incomplete big tower in Babylon during the time of Babylonian captivity. And so you can imagine the people who are writing this using that as sort of this, look at that. This is a symbol. This is a symbol of who we are, a symbol of how we act, and riffing off of this incomplete ziggurat and creating the story of the Tower of Babel. And the story of the Tower of Babel people want to focus in on the way it talks about how different languages were created. And I get that. That's part of the story. But that's a distraction, I think, from the bigger message, and I think the one that's more relevant to the modern world, because all languages were not created in one spot. There wasn't this one original language that everybody spoke, and then God did this thing that created all of the languages. That's not what happened. You have linguists that can trace all kinds of different languages, and it doesn't trace back to one place or one original language. That part didn't happen. But the story is not about that. And as you have heard me say so many times, when we take the Bible literally and we focus on finding the literal meaning and proof for a literal meaning, we completely miss the point. And that is definitely the case here with the story of the Tower of Babel. So, yeah, it was written a long time after it was supposed to have happened, but that doesn't matter, because this is not about history. It's about telling us a truth, a deeper truth. So let's just get into the story. It happens in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible. And in chapter 11 is where it starts. Genesis being the book that the name is even beginning. The name Bereshit, it means beginnings. This is the beginning of everything, the story of the beginnings. So in verse 1, it says, "Now the earth had one language and the same words." And the idea is it's coming after this table of nations, but it's almost like the table of nations is almost like in medias res. Like the table of nations, it happens before this chronologically, but this is like almost going back and giving you some of the information about how we got different nations. Anyway, here we are. Now the earth had one language and the same words. And as they migrated from the east, they came upon a plan in the land of Shinar and settled there. Now, this is an important piece. And again, this is something that that a 21st century reader will often not get. There is the progression from east to west or from west to east is an important progression because there is a deep symbolism there. So in the time, the temple is set up where later the tabernacle and the temple where the Jewish people would worship God. It was set up to where you started in the east, and as you progressed through the temple from east to west, you got into holier and holier settings until you got all the way to the west, and you were in the space called the Holy of Holies, where supposedly a physical manifestation of God's presence of somehow, a cloud, a sparkle, I don't know, was right there in that part of the temple in the Holy of Holies. Like, you got closer to God as you moved west. So when you see in the Old Testament, in the Bible in general, somebody going towards the east, it means the symbol is that they're going away from God. And that's something that would have been well known by the people, the people in captivity in Babylon when this was being written. When they said they journeyed to the east, they would be like, "Oh man, okay, this is a story about bad times. This is a story about when people were going away from God." You see this also in Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve does this, then Cain does this. The journeying east it's not a good sign. So says as they journeyed east, it's almost like as they journeyed east, dun dun dun. You would hear in a movie version of this, the sort of ominous music playing underneath this as they journeyed east. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and fire them thoroughly." So we've got bricks. Look at this. We've got bricks. This is amazing technological innovation. The Hebrew word for make bricks and for build for ourselves all contain the consonants N, B, and L, which spell mix up. Babel. It's really beautiful right here. There's this play that the writers are the word Babel, it's sort of coming across in the words like a really good rapper who is prefiguring where they're gonna end the verse with by making all these rhymes, all these sounds that sound like the final word till when you get to the final word it just hits harder. That's what's happening here. The words that they're using have this sort of beat to them, this sort of rhythm to them that's like babble, babble, babble. And the other thing, if you are familiar with the biblical story, the phrase "let us make bricks." That has a lot of weight too. The phrase "let us make bricks" is actually used only of the Hebrews making bricks as slaves. So there's a call back to the Exodus story, or a call forward in this sense. But the Exodus story would have been written a little earlier, when the people in Babylon in exile were telling this story, they would know the Exodus story. And so when you hear "come, let us make bricks," people are going to be saying, "Oh, geez, is that again? It's this is, I thought we got away from that." Let us make bricks it's a callback to the story in Exodus. In Exodus, they were enslaved and they were forced to make bricks as slaves. the people who considered themselves God's chosen people were enslaved to make bricks. The bricks are a symbol of injustice. The bricks are a symbol of oppression. The bricks are a symbol of Egypt, which is, wait for it, an empire builder. And we are seeing here what we're seeing, our unfortunately named Nimrod, this sort of proto-empire. It's this sort of, oh man, this is the Egypt of its day. Let us make bricks. And yet, that making bricks, it hits hard. Because when they were slaves in the Exodus, slaves are not valued the same way as free people are. Free people are valued because of who they are, of what they can be, and their mind, and all of the things. Slaves are valued like a hammer or a shovel. They're tools. How efficient can they be? That's how slaves are valued. And there is an inhuman quality about it. This like removing of people's humanity. And all of that is like pounding in and coming with this famous phrase from the Exodus story. When the people who are working on the Tower of Babel says, "Come, let us make bricks." Come, let us make bricks, fire them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves." Let us make a name for ourselves. Let us make a name for ourselves is a big deal. It says, because otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. So the idea is, if they make a name for ourselves, if they do something amazing, if they build the biggest empire, that will ensure that they are forever. That will ensure that they won't be scattered. The other thing that this alludes to is sort of the complete impiety of the people, as well as like the knowledge that God wants to scatter them rather than to stick together, because this idea of let us make a name for ourselves, that is verbiage that is directly against the kind of classic way of like God making a name for God's people, God like giving names to the forefathers of this. It's just everything about this, that phrase, let's make a name lest we be scattered. It's like these people are going east, as far east as they can go. They're rejecting God. They're not finding their identity in their faith, in their religion, in any of that. They're all the way east. They're going as far away from God. And they know that doing that is going to make God come against them. Because to build an empire, to do it with this violent Lord Nimrod, you will be oppressing people. And let's be clear, in the Bible, if you want to find whose side God is on, you just find the people that are oppressed. God's on their side. There's also a little shade that's thrown here. because they talk about making a name for themselves with this big tower that's going to have its top in the heavens. And the idea is that like they're going to build a tower all the way up to God. They're going to be as high and impressive as God. And it's so impressive and it's so big. And then it says, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower. And that is some low-key shade that is being thrown at this tower, because it is, these people are saying we're building a tower that is so high that we're all the way up to where God is. And God is saying, what are you talking about? I'm way up here. I can't even see the tower. Like if I want to see this thing that you say is so tall that is reaching all the way up to me, I got to come down. I got to come down to see it. That's how small it is. Yeah. The Lord God came down to see the city tower which the mortals had built. And the Lord said, look, they are one people and they all have one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there so they will not understand one another's speech. This phrase, nothing that they plan, nothing they plot is impossible, is actually used of God later in the book of Job. It's furthering this sort of already clear image that what these people are doing is they are putting themselves in God's place. They're replacing God with themselves because they are so impressed with themselves. And this word, nothing that they plot, nothing they plan. I like the word plot because it's the right. A bunch of scholars will say like there's a nefarious feeling to this world, nothing that they plan. And I like the word plot. One of the scholars suggested plot might be better because it feels like nothing that they plot against all the world, all this evil that they are doing, all the horrible things that empire building does. Yeah. The Lord's words sort of are an obvious takeoff of the humans' words in verses 3 and 4. Humans say, come, let us make bricks. God says, come, let us mix up. Right? And so it says God scatters them as punishment. But the punishment also puts in place this fulfillment of the command that God has to Adam and then later to Noah to fill the earth. Right. And I think that there's something interesting, something very true about that. That sometimes when things go wrong, when you feel like you're experiencing punishment, the punishment actually leads you to a place maybe you wouldn't have gotten to without the punishment. The punishment leads you to a place where you really should have been heading all along. I almost want to say that I wish that it sort of said that it scattered them to the west, right? That their punishment brought them back to God in a way. But I told you that this story was not really about language. I mean, it's kind of about language. It's a little bit about language. Language is part of the thing here, but there's something bigger too. The Tower of Babel is as much about technology as it is about language. We have this thing that we do as humans where we create some new piece of technology, right? We create radio or television or the smartphone or the large language model. And we are so impressed with ourselves, and we think of ourselves as the savior of the world, right? Oh, look at what we've done. Look at how we have created this thing it's going to protein fold and find new cures for things. And we want, at least our technologists. I lived in Silicon Valley for a minute, and a lot of the people, really most of the people there, have this altruism and greed at the same time. Greed too, but this altruism. A lot of the people who are working and starting these tech startups will honestly, when you're on the playground next to them, watching your kids swing on a swing, they'll tell you that they believe that they are changing the world in a good way, that they're fixing something. Their technology is enabling something that could never have happened before. Cancer is going to be cured. All of the carbon is going to be taken out of the environment. All the excess carbon is going to be taken out of the atmosphere. We're going to fix all of these things that were broken before us, and we're doing it through technology. Isn't this amazing? But that sort of altruism, I mean, it's almost like sticking your head in the dirt. Because there is a profound truth that you actually find in the book of Genesis. You actually find in those first couple of chapters that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that when God creates humanity, God creates humanity in God's image. And there's this idea that when something is created, it bears in part the image of its creator. Like when Picasso paints a painting, it bears in some way the image of Picasso in it. Technology is the same way. And it is clear that humanity is not perfect. Humanity isn't anywhere close to perfect. We have both good and bad in us. And technology has the same thing. When we create technology, it has both potential for good and potential for bad because it is made of us. It has our image in it. I had a professor one time who said it this way, and I thought it was brilliant. He said, technology just makes us more efficient at doing what we already did, or at being who we already were. And if you are a war-making culture, technology is going to help you kill more people and wage more war. If you are a person of peace, it will help you be more peaceful. If you are anxious, it will help you. It will help you be way more efficient at being anxious. Technology just helps us be more efficient at being who we already were. Technology doesn't fix anything. Technology just helps us almost be more of who we already were. It's like when people talk about, oh my gosh, I can't believe how bad TikTok is because TikTok is showing me all these horrible things, when all of those of us who are on TikTok on the regular know TikTok shows you what you're looking at. If you are looking at politics, it's going to show you more politics. If you're just swiping by the politics, they're not going to show up as much. But if instead you are watching Salt Hank create the most decadent sandwiches you've ever seen over and over again, you're going to get all kinds of sandwich content. TikTok is just showing you what you already are looking at. And so it's funny because they're sort of revealing themselves in the process. Because that's what technology is. Technology just makes us more efficient at doing and being who we are. And if we want to change, technology is not going to get us there. If we want to change, we're going to have to do the real work. And the other thing that we see in this story is technology is actually distracting them from each other. They're building this big thing and they're losing sight of their humanity. And I think that the creation of all of the languages, it's this beautiful contrast, because on one level, it sort of undermines the technology. They aren't able to do as much as they used to be able to do. But instead, God creates languages, and languages bring people together. Languages help people have a shared perception, a shared story, a shared way of being in the world. And so the consequence for the Tower of Babel is actually creating more community. Which for me is where I always end up with this story. I end up sort of gut checked. I spend a lot of time on screens, a lot of time on technology, and technology can help me connect with people. Like, we have this wonderful Discord group called Not Church. Not Church is a place where people who want to figure out what they believe, want a spiritual community, but have been traumatized by churches and can't go back to a church, won't go back to a church, find that community. We talk about all kinds of different ways that people connect with God. We talk about episodes like this. This is book club. The club for the book is in the Discord and Not Church Discord. Yeah. But so technology can enable that community that somebody said. It's like not church. It's like all the things I wanted from church, the community, the people who were there for us, without people telling me I'm going to hell because I believe the wrong thing. Technology can enable that, and I love that. But man, if I'm in the screens too much, I'm missing out on the real world. I'm missing out on the face-to-face kind of community that I can have with people. So in some way, the Tower of Babel is also about me needing to put my phone down, to take out my AirPods, and go for a walk. Hear the way the breeze is blowing through the leaves in fall. To think my own thoughts, to have coffee with somebody and hear their story. Sometimes it just feels like I need God to confuse my language so that I can't use the technology and force myself to lean into community. And speaking of community, I'd love for you to be part of that Not Church community. It's really simple. You just go to Patreon, patreon.com/skepticpastor. You can subscribe, $3. $3 a month gets you access to this Discord community that is beautiful and wonderful, and we are here for each other. And the reason we charge is because we're not going to ask people to give us 10% of something, any sort of donation. The deal with this is you pay for what you get. And if you aren't getting what you need, you just stop paying. There's no guilt. There's no shame. I'd love for you to be part of it. If you'd like that kind of community, just go to Skeptic Pastor on Patreon. Patreon.com/SkepticPastor. We'd love to see you there. That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.